So we are on Parashat Chaye Sarah, and let's begin, Susan, please, with the prayer that we begin with to study Torah.
Do we want to have the cacophony of voices with everyone?
Sure. Sure. So everyone can unmute, and we can let's just take a breath first. Be present in this Zoom room with these other souls. And if we were together in person, we'd be saying it out loud together. And now we just get to hear less harmony, more cacophony, but it's still beautiful. Baruch
Atah Adonai
Eloheinu
melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
And Eric, would you read our English for us, please?
Blessed are you, Holy One, who has commanded us with the mitzvah to immerse ourselves in words of Torah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. So we are, as I mentioned, we are reading Chaye Sarah, which is the life of Sarah. And as you're going to see in a moment, here we have this whole portion named after Sarah. And in the very first verses, she passes away. So this really is a portion of grief and comfort. And we're going to see how both of those themes interlace. There are other themes as well, but Susan's going to help us by putting up the Sefaria text first, please, Susan. And you're going to take a look at that. Those of you who have a book, you can have that on your lap, but I wanted to have the option of having the text on the screen for you. So I know it's really small. You can make it bigger so that you can see more people or fewer people if you want, but the text is there for you now. So Chip, would you be willing to read the first two verses of chapter 23?
Jeffrey, I think you've been called on.
Yeah. Chip, go for it.
Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and bewail her.
So here in the first two verses, we lose Sarah. She passes away. Yet this whole parsha is named for her, and you will, I hope, in the course of our time together, think about why the whole portion gets to be named for her, even though she has passed away. And because of who we are gathered in this class, there's a real poignancy. Many of us have lost folks in our families. And whether it was a beloved parent or a sibling or a friend or a grandparent, and here the idea that in the Torah, we begin a new portion, still in this first book of Genesis, which is all about families and connections between families. We have this point made that not only that this was her lifetime, it was this many years. And it's interesting that the rabbis choose to repeat this. Yehiyu Chaye Sarah, and this was the life of Sarah. Mea shana ve'esrim shana. And here, literally, it's mea means 100. So mea shana, 100 years and 20 years. So 120 years. And then it repeats, it came, I'm sorry, 127 years. And then the last words are, again, these are the years of Sarah. This was how long Sarah's life was. So the kind of the repetition that's built into the Hebrew, and we see it in the English, where there's this repetition of Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life. So we as readers are really asked to focus on this idea of how long her life was. And in a way, it challenges us to think about not only the length of someone's life, but what is happening during those years? What is within each span? Yeah, Ned, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm curious, excuse me, about the Hebrew. It says, the way the Hebrew reads, it says, like Me'ah Shana, 100 years, V'esrim Shana, and 20 years, for Sheva Shanim, and 7 years. That's not the way one usually says 127 years. The word years is in there. It's 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Is there any reason for that?
This is the way it often is in the Torah, that they'll add them like that. I think it's a more archaic form than you would use today. If you said, how old are you? You wouldn't say 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, or in the case of someone in this room, 50 years and 7 years, or something like that, or 20 and 5. We have wonderful range of ages in this class tonight. So I think my first answer is that it's archaic. I would need more of a Hebrew scholar to help me out on exactly what this is. But for us reading it now, there's a real sense of the emphasis of what, and to me, I'm kind of spiritually challenged. What is the essence of time? How did she fill those years? I mean, we know a fair amount about her life. And we've just, of course, read some very dramatic stories about her family and her offspring, her beloved son, Isaac, and her husband, Abraham. So it says where she died, and her husband, then a portion that we're not going to read tonight is about him finding a burial place for her. So you can go back and read them on your own. I wanted to move ahead because we have a very dramatic story that is very familiar to some of us and maybe new for others of us, about the next generation, which is Sarah's legacy, her son Isaac. So because we know that he was this longed for child, and now the question is, how will the line of Abraham be carried on? So Fred, would you read for us in chapter 24, verse 1?
Hi, everyone. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Am I continuing?
Yeah, please continue. I'll tell you when to stop.
Okay. And Abraham said to the senior servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac."
All right, so I'm going to stop you there. We read Lech Lecha together, the whole idea of Abraham goes forth and leaves the land that he's from. And now he's saying to his servant, go back there. That's where you should get a wife for my son. Keep going, please.
Okay. Oh.
Verse 5.
Oh, thank you. And the servant said to him, "What if the woman does not consent to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham answered him, "On no account must you take my son back there."
Wow. So here we've got a lot of wonderful things going on, and I just would love to hear some response to any of the above that Fred just read? What popped out for you? What stood out for you from this narrative? Hey, Torah Query guys. Put your hand on my thigh. I can't believe you missed that.
Well, there's a contradiction here. He's saying
Okay.
to make sure to go back to the land from what I came to get him a wife. And then when the servant asks about it, he says no. Or does he say yes? On no account must you take my son back there. That just contradicted what he said before.
Okay, I'd love to hear from someone else who read it a little differently. Wesley, you're not raising your hand, but your cat is wagging its tail. Okay, Steve. Oh, you just put your finger up. Are you also?
Oh, Eve.
Oh, Eve, please.
Yeah, where Abraham says to his servant, "Put your hand under my thigh."
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that means.
Okay. Do we have anyone who would like to jump in and guess about this?
Is that making an oath? Is it
Making-
making an oath
Okay, so it's a form
rather
of
than a
making-
sexual thing?
Okay, it's making an oath. And Chip says rather than a sexual thing. Yet it's a very intimate notion. It's a very motion here, a very intimate motion. So it is not, you're right, it's not seen as sexual between them, but rather this is the idea of where does our strength come from? Part of our strength is, I mean, it's in our thighs, but our thighs are close to our sexual organs. So here it's like, I really mean this. This is, I want you to hear me, and I am giving you access. This is, we're having this bodily connection. You know, so we might say, we might put our arm around someone, or we might even, I mean, tell me, what do you think would be something that in a pre-COVID, or may there be post-COVID times, if we wanted to have a physical connection with someone where we're saying, will you promise me? How serious are you? Yeah, Susan.
Hug.
Might hold both hands so you're both looking at each other and there's that physical connection.
Okay, thank you.
It'd be something like, yeah, putting your hand on somebody's shoulder with one hand and shaking hands with the other.
Okay. Any
Or
other-
simply a hug.
Or simply a hug.
I think it would be eye contact.
Mm.
You'd have to have eye contact in order to think the person was taking you seriously.
So here we have a number of options, but in this particular text, it's very physical. Put your hand under my thigh and promise me. Now, I want to go back to what was brought up before. Is there a contradiction in Abraham's request? Susan's shaking her head. No. You want to explain that to us, Susan?
So Abraham is telling the servant to go back to the land of Abraham's birth and get a wife, but not to take Isaac back. So the servant goes and brings the wife to Isaac where they are now.
Right, but don't take, Isaac isn't supposed to go live back there. Get the wife from my family, from my people. So we've got, you know, we are so struggling with this concept of tribe, I think, in contemporary America, and we Jews have always struggled with it. So to see it, I mean, and not surprisingly, we're reading this beloved text. So here it's like, I don't want a wife for my son from the Canaanites. They are other to me. They are not our people. I want to go back to my people. And I want you to go back. I don't want my son to live there, but I want somebody from my people. And we see that still. I don't know if any of you have friends who come from the Indian subcontinent, but there are a lot of American, even American-born folks with South Indian heritage who go back to India to find a partner. And they're not the only ones. They're just one example. Okay, so this line number 5 is very important. What if the woman does not consent to follow me? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? No. But I want to focus on this. The woman needs to consent. This is pretty early in the Torah, and we already have this concept that the woman needs to consent. And then I think we got through verse 6. How about Jeff, would you read verses 7, 8, and 9 here, please?
The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who promised me on oath, saying, I will assign this land to your offspring. He will send his angel before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. And if the woman does not consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but do not take my son back there.
Okay.
So the servant,
Oh, go ahead.
so the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master's Abraham and swore to him as
Was bidden.
bidden.
Stop. Okay, there's something weird that these letters pop up in the middle of a sentence, and I apologize, it's the copying. So we've got both go back, and we've got a lot going on here. You're going to promise, and an angel's going to come with you, because God promised me that I'm going to have multitudes. God who took me. And then here again, it's this repetition that we had. Lech lecha me'artzecha u'memoladecha. In verse 7 here, the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land and promised me, saying, I will give this land to your offspring. That God will send an angel. So you're going to be set up. Now promise me that you're going to do this, and you're not going to be alone as you go forth. So I want to keep going here. The servant goes, and he has camels with him. And in verse 12, he prays that it's all going to work. Here I stand. And now I want to take a look, verses 13 and 14. And Stephanie, why don't you read those for us?
Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw the water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master. He had scarcely finished speaking when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah and wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The
Okay,
maiden was
just a sec. Thank you. So what's going on here? What is the servant asking for? Yes, Fred.
It seems to me that the woman has to pass a particular test of being particularly gracious and kind and going beyond a little bit. So I think there's she has to pass kind of this test to be good enough for Isaac.
Okay, good. Anything else that someone sees here? All right, let's keep going. Stephanie, please, I cut you off. So
That's okay.
let's go 15 through 21.
He had scarcely finished speaking when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, excuse me, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The maiden was very beautiful, a virgin whom no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant ran towards her and said, "Please, let me sip a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she said, and she quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and let him drink. When she had let him drink his fill, she said, "I will also draw for your camels until they finish drinking." Quickly emptying her jar into a trough, she ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. The man meanwhile stood gazing at her, silently wondering whether the Lord had made his errand successful or not. Oh, she no, I didn't skip that. She
Oh,
drew for
sorry.
all his camels.
Thank you. So had God made the errand successful?
Almost. We don't know if she's gonna accept it yet.
All right, we don't, but she seems to have fulfilled the test that, as Fred said, so far, that she not only came forth and gave him something to drink, but she's worried about the animals. Are the animals okay? And there are a lot of animals here. Okay, so I read today this in preparation for being with you. There, some of you know this book. I've mentioned it several times. The essay on this chapter talks about how it's written by a young woman named Rachel Brody, and she writes about how there's got to be a lot of physical strength to bring water for this many camels. What did they say? 10 camels. And so we already have a sense that not only is she very beautiful, but she's strong as well. And we also know that she is kind. So she seems to be passing not only the tests they put out, but some additional tests as well. So Rachel Brody makes a point about, okay, now, there are women, but this is the kind of woman we're interested in. She's strong, she's smart, she's beautiful, she's gracious. She's challenging gender stereotypes by her physical strength. So now we're going to find out whether she's going to be willing to come. Because this is, Abraham said, she has to be willing to come. And this is the first time. This is so interesting because remember, Abraham set his wife up to, and when they went traveling, he said that his wife was his sister. So now all of a sudden he has a sense that a woman has agency, and who knows, is it that he's concerned about his son who was traumatized by being taken up to Mount Moriah? And so his son, who may have been, we don't know, damaged in that encounter, needs a stronger partner or a partner who has strength. So there's all this, our tradition has a lot of fun writing midrashim and imagining what was really going on in the minds of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And here we have this story where it goes on, and I mean, you can see from the text that's here, whose daughter are you? And then she says, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, and why don't you come to our house and spend the night? And then the servant makes a prayer. Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld steadfast faithfulness from my master, for I've been guided on my errand by the Holy One. to the house of my master's kinsman. I've come to the right place. Then we go, and when we read this whole portion, we see that I've skipped here for you between lines 27 and 56. So there's 30 verses of the visit and the talking and the gifts and who are you and where did you come from? And once it's established, okay, this is our relative is calling for our daughter. And then the question is, will she come? So after they've feasted and welcomed and been gracious for several days, we're now at line 56, and the he is the servant again. So the servant said to his hosts, don't delay me. God has made my errand successful. May I now go home to my master? And they, Rebecca's family says, let us call the girl and ask for her reply. So Muriel, would you read lines 50, beginning in line 58, please? But you have to unmute yourself, please.
They called Rebecca and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will. So they went off. So they sent off their sister Rebecca and her nurse, along with Abraham's servant and his men. Should I keep going?
Yes. So already, so the they, who's the they here? It's her family. Probably both the women and the men of her family. And they offer her a blessing.
And they blessed Rebecca and said to her, oh, sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. May your offspring seize the gates of their foes.
Keep going.
Oh, then Rebecca and her maids arose, mounted the camels, and followed the man. So the servant took Rebecca and went his way.
So here we have Rebecca. We don't really know how old she is. Was she 12? Was she 18? Was she 28? And beginning to wonder whether she'll ever have a mate. We don't know, but it's very, very rich for Midrash, for imagining who this woman was. And now she's kind of facing the rest of her life. So I do want to get to these next few verses. And Muriel, why don't you continue to read for us? 62.
Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Beer Laharoi, for he was settled in the region of the Negeb. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field toward us? And the servant said, that is my master. So she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things he had done. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother, Sarah, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death.
So some of you have read this many times. For others of you, it's still new. I would love to hear your responses to this ending that we've just read together. And you can raise your hand, or just, there's only 13 of us. You can start to 13, 14, 15 of us. We just jump right in. Okay, Stephanie, did you want
Does that mean that the woman cannot die in peace until her son is married?
Well, Sarah has already died, but
Oh, that's right. She died in the beginning.
yeah. So if we read this line 67 again, Isaac brought Rebekah, her, into the tent of his mother Sarah, who has passed away. And he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death.
What does that mean, going into the tent of his mother?
Yeah, what is-
All right, so Muriel, what do you
I-
think it means?
So, I don't know. It's the son, he's obviously very attached to his mother. It almost says he needs her approval or something. It's incestuous. It's very strange to me. It's like taking the woman into his mother's home bed, essentially.
Okay, Steve has raised his hand.
Okay, I see that a little differently. It seems to me that by taking Rebecca to his mother's tent, she becomes the new matriarch. She and he are taking over.
That would make sense.
All right, some other responses. Anyone else have something to add here?
I find it very touching that Isaac was able to love someone after his mother's death, and that he was comforted.
Say some more, Eve.
Well, I guess it's implied how much he was attached to his mother and how much she meant to him, and that he was able to love after a big loss means that he recovered.
Well, it says Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. So the two are joined. I think that's what you're saying, Eve. And you said you found it quite touching. Other responses?
Is there any indication of the time period that passed between his mother's death and his marrying Rebecca?
Unfortunately, we have a lot of gaps to fill in. That's why the rabbis write the midrash, because we don't know. I mean, here we have these very specific years that Sarah lived 127 years. In the way we count years nowadays, we know that the years in the Bible couldn't possibly be the way we count them today because they're too long. People don't live 127 years now. And even though there was a piece in the New York Times about someone who's 100 who still was a priest, did you see this in today's Times, who wants to keep working and they want to bring him back to Rome because they say he's finished serving his flock, and he says, no, I'm not. I'm still going strong. But 127 years without the miracles of modern medicine, we don't know. So we don't know the answer. We don't know how old he was. There's lots of debate when we've studied the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, how old Isaac actually is when Abraham takes him up to the mountain. So we don't know. So that what we have the opportunity to do here is to really focus on the very few words that are here and to see, and I think that Eve got there pretty quickly, about the powerful emotion here. That here is a man who has mourned the loss of his mother and now found comfort in the love of Rebecca. Wesley.
Yeah, I was going to say, it speaks to me to maybe like a wish that he felt his mother had for what might happen in his life that he wasn't able to complete during her lifetime, and like maybe feeling like he hadn't lived up to everything she had wanted, or she hadn't seen that. And then once he's able to fulfill that, he's at a better place with her having passed and having lived out something she might have wanted for him.
So what the mother wanted for the son and his sense of, now I will have a life. Maybe I will have, hopefully I will have children. Thank you. Ellen.
So I think, of course, there was the trauma of his mother's death, but there was also the trauma of almost being killed by his father. So I don't doubt he was looking and needing comfort. And I think it's interesting that Rebecca gets off her camel. She almost initiates coming toward him as he's approaching her. And so I think that that's a measure of her internal strength. And I love that it's associated with a well, because I think this idea of water and wells, I think has something to do with walking with God, like Miriam's well. So I think that it probably is speaking about Rebecca being strong in spirit as well.
Thank you. So since we're on this, I'm going to share a poem that's in this book. And as you know, there's poetry for every portion. So this is written by Amy Blank, Zichron Livracha, an American Jewish poet. I left home, it's called Rebecca. So just, it's really a modern midrash, this poem. I left home easily, as when the ready seed drops from the tree, carefree, for I knew not what. I stuffed my toys into the saddlebag, braided my hair, and for that dusty journey wore my broidered gown. I chose my camel and set out lighthearted to enjoy adventure. Scarcely a pang as tents and trees of home faded into wilderness. But this I wondered, how would it be fit to ask that awesome man, Abraham's servant, what manner was he to whom I was betrothed? Better to hold the question, I decided. Isaac, after all, was also kinsman. One more, fabulous Abraham's son, and I would be his daughter, sister, wife, hardly a difference in my young mind. So this kind of imagines Rebecca as a little girl, having no idea where she's going, but being very open to whatever might befall her. So one modern midrash. And I also wanted to bring to you, I also always bring more than I have time for, the Torah translation that we've been looking at a couple of weeks. And so maybe Susan, you can put that up now. And as you know, all the names are different, but what's really important is that the genders are different. So this portion called Chaye Sarah is Chaye Sahar, because Sarah has become Sahar. And the idea that Sarah, the patriarch, who is the husband of the matriarch of Ruchama, has now died. So as you know, because we've been doing this for a couple of weeks together, everything is reversed. And what's very powerful is to think about this story of Isaac and Rebecca with reverse gender. So that it's the mother who is sending forth a servant to get a husband for her daughter. And then this husband needs to prove himself, just as Rebecca in the original Torah needs to prove herself. And what is attractive about a young man as a possible mate, in the same way that we're playing here with what is attractive about a young woman. And this is why I enjoyed the essay by Rachel Brody, who is saying, well, she's a kind of lesbian type of woman, a strong woman. But what kind of man is here? Also a beautiful man who also is strong enough to feed, to offer drink to the camels. Whose son are you? Is there room in your mother's house to accommodate us? And he said, oh, I am the son of Bethuel, blah, blah, blah. We have enough straw, come and stay at our house. And then looking at the end where the names are changed again. So it's now Titzchak, who is female, goes out to stroll in the field. And she lifted up her eyes and she saw the camels coming. And the name is changed here from Rebecca to Marbek. And they explain, and I'll just share with you because it's so, they've done such a beautiful job in this, that Marbek is the male parallel to Rebecca. And they looked up, okay, what is Rebecca? Probably got her name from the word bakar, meaning cattle. The way her daughters-in-law in the future are named after female livestock. Leah means a cow. Rachel is a female lamb. So the rabbis use the name Rebecca, as a synonym for the reins of an animal, maybe because it reminded them of the root havrak, meaning to hug. So in Torata, as my wonderful friends, Yael and Tamar, are playing with this in the most wonderful way, there is no Rebecca. Instead, there is Marbek, the male version, from the biblical expression Egel Marbek, which means a fatted calf. So they look for what is the root of the name Rivka, Rebecca, and then they say, well, what would a male version be? So Marbek is the one who is Rebecca. So the whole idea here of the man being taken in and seen, oh, this is going to be my husband. And this is who will bring me comfort after my father's death. So as Eve helped us to see very clearly that this link between grief and comfort, grief and the possibility of love again, grief, which is acknowledging lost love, acknowledging that there was love and it sustained us and now it's gone. So how do we fill that void? So I thought about this, that this whole parsha is really, about love, about the love of Abraham and Sarah, about the love of Isaac and Sarah, Abraham and Isaac, and now Isaac and Rebecca. And what's really notable here is that this is the first time love is talked about in the Torah. So this portion is lifted up very often to say, I mean, look what it says. It says Isaac loved her. And the idea that love will comfort us, that love will bring us comfort. And we know that her life goes forward and she has two sons, Jacob and Esau. That's going to be next week. This is a very, very rich series of portions of all this family dynamic. So I wonder, there's a few more things I would love to share, but I would love to hear from you too. Any hands up before we? So because I was really thinking about the love, I found a beautiful love poem, and it's written by an American a Chinese American poet named Li Young Lee. Maybe you're familiar with him. He's won many poetry awards. And I found this poem and I'm going to share it with you. So just sit back, and this is a poem about love. It's called I Loved You Before I Was Born. And one of the things I thought of is the rabbis have a great deal of fun thinking about the order of creation. What was created? What did God create before God created the world? And did God create love? And I will just mention that we have prayers of love both before and after the Shema, we Jews. So love is very much in the forefront of our tradition, whether or not we remember that or not. But so here is a poem for you, for each of you, as we read this portion about love. And please take it in whatever ways you'd like. Love of God, love of other human beings, love of an animal in your life who brings you joy. So, I loved you before I was born. I loved you before I was born. It doesn't make sense, I know. I saw your eyes before I had eyes to see. And I've lived longing for your ever look ever since. That longing entered time as this body, and the longing grew as this body waxed, and the longing grows as the body wanes. The longing will outlive this body. I loved you before I was born. It doesn't make sense, I know. Long before eternity, I caught a glimpse of your neck and shoulders, your ankles and toes, and I've been lonely for you from that instant. That loneliness appeared on earth as this body. And my share of time has been nothing but your name, outrunning my ever saying it clearly. Your face fleeing my ever kissing it firmly once on the mouth. In longing, I am most myself, wrapped, my lamp mortal, my light hidden and singing. I give you my blank heart. Please write on it what you wish. So this is my poem for Isaac and Rebecca, and for Titzchak and Marbek, and for all who have longing and all who have found comfort. So I hope that's each of you tonight. And this is the last time we're going to be together with me for a month. And I am working with David, with Heshi and Ellen, and hopefully you're going to have some other people teaching in the month of November. I'm going to be in Israel, and I would be very happy to teach, except the time change makes it impossible. So I'm going to join you again on December 7th, and we will take up the Parsha for that week. And in between, you're going to have another teacher. So, Heshi, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, and what I want to say is that Ellen and I are looking at other substitutes for November. We haven't been able to nail down anyone, so stay tuned. As soon as we figure it out, I'm sure there will be an email that will go out to everybody. But in the meantime, on behalf of everybody here, we wish you a very pleasant journey.
Thank you.
And please stay safe.
Thank you. I'm taking all of your good energy with me, and I am very lucky. I bought a ticket in September with the hopes that the COVID restrictions on travel to Israel would be lifted, and they are lifting on November 1st, and I'm flying on November 2nd. So I took a gamble, and God willing, it's working. And I will, at this time next week, I'll be boarding my airplane.
That's great.
So I look forward to being with all of you again in December, and God willing, you're going to have some fabulous teacher.
God willing, yes.
All right. So to love and to comfort for each of us.
Safe
All right,
travels,
good evening,
Rabbi.
everybody.
Safe travels, Sue.
Thank you. Erev Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a great trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Good
Nice
night.
seeing everybody.